Great, thanks. So today, again, it seems like a pretty big topic, talking about how to use process science to get better ROI from your data and your analytics work. But really, at the high level we're going to talk about today, the agenda is really to kind of help refresh and reassert a lot of operating definitions floating around in the space that, in my experience consulting and being out in the field, they get muddled a lot, and what causes a lot of confusion and ambiguity around everyone's efforts around harvesting value from big data, doing good analytics, and kind of tying together a lot of things going on in the business environment. Especially a lot of these big IT projects, they get really bogged down with a lot of lingo and jargon and people trying to do this or do that, and no one's really aligned on what they're trying to do. So you can see here in the agenda, we're going to just talk about process from a process science definition and kind of set that as a backdrop. And then we're going to talk about some of the more common data terms, and then we're going to talk about why measuring processes and combining sort of a process sort of foundation with what we're trying to do with our data is going to really be the answer of how we get better ROI from our big data and our analytical work. And again, as I go through, please feel free to write in questions. I'll try to maybe pause to answer one or two midway, but because it's a fairly short time slot we have today, I'll try to leave at least 5 minutes at the end to address questions also. So what we normally start with in this conversation is talking about a process. And I start with an outdated definition, which is the very generic definition of a process, which is saying that it's simply the mechanism that transforms inputs, which could be anything, into outputs, goods or services. Now, when you look at it this way, and this is what most people think about process, it's very mechanical, and it's what I'd like to call unqualified. So when you can see in the slide, I say there's more to the story. You got to think to yourself, what if nobody wants the outputs of a process? So you take inputs and you put them into a process, and then nobody wants the outputs. Well, what happens is the process is not going to last very long. It doesn't really exist in the environment if the outputs are unqualified. They have to provide some benefit to people. So you can't just say a process is anything out there just changing and transforming things without qualification. The definition of a process, you should say, is more aptly that it's energy of any kind. So it's not just an input like, we're turning this wood into boat parts. Energy could be capital. It could be human labor. I mean, it really is, try to broaden the definition in your mind of what fuels processes. And then value is the outcome of any process that's sustained in the environment for us to observe. Because again, if you didn't create value in a process, which is basically the difference between the benefits of a process and the costs to run or power that process, then the process is not going to be viable. So when we talk about what is process in the process science definition, it's the mechanism that transforms energy into value. And that, if you can kind of root that into your mind, it's going to be the backdrop of a lot of the process work and the data work that you're doing. And again, what are some business examples of a process, just to continue the conversation? Well, here's just a basic list: sending an invoice, preparing a proposal, onboarding a new hire, logging a payment, sending a newsletter. The reason I kind of provide this list is because it's all over the place, but the reality is everything you could name, everything is a process, especially in a business where you have energy going into these things, people are doing this work, and there's value coming out of them. And that's why, a lot of people kind of said they sort of laugh when they first hear this, because a lot of people think that processes, it has to be documented, or it means bureaucracy, or oh, is there a process here? Did somebody actually create some workflow in a system or whatever? But process, whether it's ad hoc, it's chaotic, it's documented, it's undocumented, everything in your environment is a process. And the reason this is so applicable to the conversation we're having is because data has to answer questions about process. So if you're going to be a professional that works with data in any capacity, you have to start by asking yourself, what is the process that this data is addressing, and in what way is it related? Is it trying to answer a question about the outcomes of a process, the variation of a process, the actual nature of a process? You have to answer this question. You have to relate it back to an operating process that's actually happening in the real world. Otherwise, your data work is not rooted to anything. So if you're of the impression that a process has to be formalized to exist, you're going to be missing a big part of the conversation. Your data has to be anchored to something. So when you start to think about the definition of processes, it's everything in motion around you. It's everything in the real world. It can be happening a million times a second. It can be happening once every 3 years, a process, if it's a big project process. But either way, energy goes into the processes that move the world around us, and then it provides value to the market, value to the client, whatever it is. And when we're talking about data and big data and analytics, you have to make the association between what the data is saying, where did it come from, and what process it's related to in the real world. So that's a bit of an intro on a process, the definition from a process science standpoint. And again, I could probably give a full course on the definition of process and what that really means. So we'll just kind of, squeeze it into that few-minute intro. But if you can take that, let's now move on to a data refresher. Because again, I've worked with data scientists and data professionals over the course of my career, and these foundational definitions get confused, and everyone starts to talk over each other when they talk about data work, so it's good to have a refresher every once in a while. So for data to be valuable, I've really honed in on 3 dimensions, which I think are the most important and the ones that get abused the most in business vernacular, or rather I should say business jargon. So for data to be valuable or provide value in this type of work, it has to have high quality, meaning it has to tell the right story. It has to be valid, which is telling that story credibly, and it has to have high integrity, which it means that it tells the right story credibly whenever you reference it, meaning that it does not degrade over time, and we'll talk about that. So when you talk about the value of the story you're telling, it's typically the answer to the critical question about operating reality. So again, I use that term operating reality, but you could say it's answering the critical question about the process that somebody's asking you. And we'll continue to return to that so we can anchor your mind about how you're going to have these conversations going forward. So let's start with data quality. A lot of people, when they think data quality, they think, how expensive was this data, or how fancy was it, or what system did it come from? It has nothing to do with the actual quality, like you'd say buying the quality of a thing. It refers to how well the data presented represents the actual scenario being measured. So when we again bring it back to our process language, does it tell you what the process is doing accurately if you're measuring a subject? Does it represent what is happening in reality enough to effectively inform a decision that needs to be made, or a choice that a business has to make? And is the data itself valuable, as in, we talk about, is it actually, so let's say you use it to make a decision, is the decision yielding value for the company? It's almost like, how can you price data? You don't price it by saying, well, I paid a marketing company $1 million to use it, because $1 million data set can provide 0 value or can provide high value.
Hi there, I hope you enjoyed that last clip. My name is Michael Maludis, and if you'd like to watch the full 60 minutes of that last webcast, while also gaining complete unlimited access to our entire library of IT learning, simply visit our subscribe page at greatpro.org/subscribe. Unlimited annual access is $199 per year, but if you use the coupon code LEARN2EARN, you can drop that membership fee to just $149. That's less than $13 per month for unlimited access to over 1,000 hours of on-demand career development, covering the entire spectrum of IT management best practices, including business analysis and requirements, software development, quality and testing, risk management, process improvement, project management, and even digital transformation. But your membership doesn't just give you unlimited access to our vast learning library. You also get free access to our mobile app, as well as direct access to our network of over 300 of the world's leading IT consultants, all of whom are dedicated to putting practical knowledge at your fingertips so that you can learn more and earn more. I hope you will join me in becoming a member of the Great IT Professional and advancing your career with us. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button above so that you get notified whenever we publish new free webcasts each week of the year. Thank you for your time, and best wishes for your continued success.